The Tucson isn't just one of Hyundai's longest running nameplates, it's also one of the best-selling Hyundais worldwide. For 2025, it's received some important changes inside and outside to help keep it fresh, but it also retains a lot of what I've always liked about this generation Tucson, most notably its size and the fact that we have 3 different drivetrains to choose from, in a segment where a lot of manufacturers have actually shrunk the amount of choices you have available. I'm just going to grab the camera so we can go for a look around the new Tucson together. The design looks an awful lot like the pre-refresh model at first glance, but when you go in a little bit closer, you'll notice that a lot of the detail work is different than before. We get a different grille. They've actually softened some of the controversial lines that we saw before, but we still have the multi-module daytime running lights integrated into the grille, although there are fewer elements than in the past. So here, these are reflector LED modules. Sorry for the flickering there. It's a little bit difficult to get the refresh rate on the camera just right, but there are now 8 of these elements. So 3 here, 1 over there, and then a mirror image on the other side. The LED headlights, those are still down here. They have sort of an ice cube style design right there. We have aero inlets on each side to help improve the aerodynamics of the Tucson. Since this is the hybrid model, we also have the little speaker right there to announce that the hybrid is coming. We have a Hyundai logo that's not chrome. Lots of chrome going on here. It's actually kind of dark chrome, but the Hyundai itself is actually not chromed. And then down below we have the other air inputs for the rest of the system with active aero shutters there as well. Moving around to the side, we get new wheels. This particular one has 19-inch wheels and 235 with tires. One big benefit to the Tucson is still its really long wheelbase. This has the longest wheelbase in this segment. It actually is about the same as the one we find in the Kia Sportage, which is a close platform mate to this. And that means a lot more rear legroom than you find in most of the competition. The side profile didn't really change, but moving around to the back, we do see a few tweaks for 2025, although the light signature is basically the same as before. The taillights are split into several modules in the back. We have these sort of fang-like brake lights here, that large light pipe that goes all the way from one side to the other. Since we're driving the hybrid model, of course, we have hybrid badging there. And we also have the Hyundai logo behind the glass, which definitely makes it easier to clean back here than some of those 3D logos we see in the competition. The only thing that I dislike back here is the location of the turn signals and the brake lights. If you back up into something relatively low, or if you're in a minor fender bender, those turn signals and the backup lights, they're ripe for the picking, I guess you could say. And then the exhaust tips, those are under the bumper back there. If I open up the hatch, you'll notice, going a little bit out of order here, that we still have a lot of cargo capacity in the Tucson. This has definitely always been an advantage of this particular platform thanks to its size. On the cubic foot front, this may be a little bit smaller of a cargo area than we find in some of the competition, but it actually holds the same 6 24-inch roller bags that a CRV or RAV4 can. And under this load floor, even though this is a hybrid model, we have enough room to actually put a spare tire. Normally we just have this foam divider here, but if I lift up the foam divider, you'll notice that we have a big spare tire storage well and the actual retention point for a spare tire as well. So I suspect you'd be able to just grab one of those temporary spare tires out of the regular Tucson, pop it back here, absolutely no problem. There is an electronics module over there on that side, but it doesn't appear to take up too much space. Also a practical touch, we have a 2-stage load floor. So if you want to, you can lower that load floor into that position and you get a few extra inches of space back here. If you do that, of course, then the load floor is not flat with the rear seats. That's why we have that 2-stage design. So if it's in its upper position, you can roll luggage all the way from the load floor just right onto those rear seat backs. The hybrid and the plug-in hybrid Tucson received some important updates for 2025, including a bit more power and improved cooling for the motor units. This still uses a 1.6-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. It still uses a 6-speed automatic transmission on the right side of the engine bay over there, and 2 electric motors. One's a motor generator unit that starts and stops the engine, generates power when you're in park or when you're stopped, and the other one assists the vehicle in moving forward. Together, you get 231 horsepower if you get the regular hybrid, 268 horsepower if you choose the plug-in hybrid. Torque comes in at 271 pound-feet total. That's definitely different than we find in the RAV4 hybrid. The RAV4 hybrid's engine produces notably less torque than this 1.6-liter turbo. So if you find yourself in a situation where the battery has been completely depleted, say you're going up a really long hill, you'll definitely feel that this is a bit peppier than that Toyota hybrid system. Of course, if you don't want a hybrid, you can still get the 2.5-liter 4-cylinder making 187 horsepower, but you're going to get about 26 miles per gallon with all-wheel drive in that model, Whereas in the hybrid, you'll get 35 to 38 miles per gallon depending on the options you choose. And if you get the plug-in hybrid, you'll get 32 miles of electric range and 35 miles per gallon. That's a pretty good deal. I have to apologize in advance if any of these shots look a little bit funky versus normal because I haven't had a lot of time with the Tucson out here in Southern California, and it's really, really bright and there's not a lot of shade. Let's talk about what's going on inside now. We have tons of legroom inside, whether we're talking about front legroom or importantly, rear legroom, and that's thanks to that long wheelbase and the relatively long body we find in here as well. Decent amount of headroom in this model included, even though we have that panoramic moonroof above me. Now on the downside, we don't find four-way adjustable lumbar support on the driver's side and no adjustable lumbar support on the passenger side at all. The difference between the Tucson and especially the RAV4 is really obvious when you hop in the back seat. There is a ton of room back here. With this front seat comfortably adjusted for me at 6 feet tall, let's do our trick here and measure for child seat accommodation. You measure up 11 inches and then you measure across. And here we have 31 inches between the seat back and this top of the seat back in the driver position, again, adjusted for me at 6 feet tall. That means that you could very easily fit even some of the largest rear-facing child seats in here. About 28, 29 inches is all you really need. We also get a wider bench in the back than we find on average, and it's really noticeable if you want to sit in the middle seat. Also, lots of headroom back here. If you take a look at the combined legroom figures on this Tucson, you'll notice that there is a significant 3 to 4 inches over the smaller entries in this segment. This front seat's all the way back in its tracks. Again, really obvious how much legroom I have left there. Hyundai also gives us a reasonable amount of recline for these rear seats. Levers there on the side. You can put it in a very upright position to help square off that cargo area in the back, or a surprisingly relaxed position. The amount of motion between relaxed and the most upright position is actually about 10 inches or so. So lots of recline going on there. Big cup holders right there in that center armrest. And this panoramic moonroof goes right about to the rear passenger's head. So it certainly gives this interior a feeling of spaciousness. If you're interested in something a little more rugged looking, you might want to check out the Tucson XRT. Of course, we get unique wheels on this model, 235 60R 18-inch tires. So that wheel is just a little bit smaller. It also has kind of a piston motif going on right there. And then we get slightly different trim around. So instead of the dark chrome accents and trim, you notice we get the black accents right there on the rear. Out back, it's basically the same theme, but we do get some slight changes down there at the bottom. A little bit less body color, a little bit more black cladding. And then this model also has the available Hyundai hitch on the back. We get a 4-pin wiring harness there on the side. Now it's time to check out the interior because arguably this is where the biggest changes have happened, although you won't find any of those up here on the ceiling. We still have slide to the side sun visors, kind of a nice touch there, both for the driver and the front passenger, and we still have this huge panoramic moonroof. As you can see, it's definitely on the large side and it goes to just about the rear passengers' heads. So this definitely has a very open and airy feeling, especially compared to some of the options in this segment that still don't offer a panoramic moonroof. We have height adjustable shoulder belts for the driver and front passenger. The front seats are very similar in design to before. We still have that sort of satin chrome U-shaped strip right there on the seat back. Perforated leather upholstery in this model because these seats are both heated and ventilated, and the bolstering is not terribly aggressive, so if you're a larger person you shouldn't have a problem finding a comfortable seating position, although again keep in mind that the passenger seat does not offer adjustable lumbar support at all. Moving on over to the doors, we find a nice combination of different materials. This is something that I've always liked about the Tucson and continues. So at the top of the door, let's just dissect this piece by piece. We have a soft touch injection molded portion there, stitched component here in the middle, fabric insert right there helping dress things up, more soft touch materials in the middle, and then a nice squishy armrest. You do find hard plastics down there, of course, at the bottom of the door to help improve durability around that bottle holder, etc. But I like the theme and I like the material choices going on in here. There are a bunch of different colors, of course, to choose from, and we're taking a look at the lighter interior available. Moving over to the dashboard, you'll notice that this has been redesigned. We have injection molded plastics up top. This has been after stitched to give it the impression of multiple pieces of material. And below that we find a storage tray where you can definitely keep some of those larger smartphones, and we have these little bumps to help keep things from sliding around. It's actually a pretty decently sized storage tray. We then get the same fabric insert that we found on the doors that wraps over there to the side, and then kind of a linear theme when it comes to the air vents, although there's no vent right here in the middle. There's just a temperature sensor intake right there, air vent over there for the passenger. bin style glove compartment. It is a little on the small side, I think. I don't know if I would be able to fit an 11-inch tablet computer inside that particular one, but of course we're going to test that out as soon as we can get this home. And speaking of tablet computer, we definitely have kind of a tablet computer vibe in the dashboard. This is a design borrowed out of some other recent Hyundai models, and it's the biggest departure in terms of the pre-refresh Tucson in here. It's two different screens, 12.3 inches, housed in a single curved display arc across the dashboard. The one in the middle is focused on, of course, infotainment and navigation, and you can use the entire screen for your smartphone projection. It supports wireless CarPlay and wireless Android Auto. I just happen to have my phone connected via the USB cable because that's my preference, and you do get the choice of how you want to connect your smartphone, which is something I appreciate. The software has also been tweaked versus the previous generation with the inclusion of things like Hyundai Pay, which is going to let you pay for parking and pay for gas stations over time once you've linked that with your Hyundai account on your smartphone. And of course, we have the factory navigation system here, which is very similar to the pre-refresh navigation as far as its design, but the functionality appears to also have been improved. Now, moving down from that, we find the touch controls and physical controls for the climate control system, so dual zone automatic climate control. Here we get touch buttons for things like the heated and ventilated seats, but then we get physical controls for things like the temperature adjustment and the infotainment controls above that. So real physical buttons for all those features there. Then there's a start-stop button on that side. We then see that Hyundai has moved the shifter to over here on the steering column. We'll take a look at that in just a second, but the big reason for doing that, mind you, not in every trim, just most trims, we get a lot more storage space right here in the center console. We'll take a look at the other interior option in just a second here. Down here we have the USB input for the infotainment system and kind of a quirky button. You can choose whether you want this USB port to be an interface with the system or just a charge-only port. Not quite clear why I need that. That one is a charge-only port there. And then over here we get the 12-volt power outlet. Big storage compartment right down there. You can see it actually goes all the way under this section of the center console, which now sort of floats above everything. Over here we have a button to command a more aggressive lock of the center coupling, our drive mode selectors, auto hold, hill descent control, 360-degree camera button, and the parking sensor enable disable button. We get the 360-degree camera system up here with a nice front view, which is kind of a cool touch. But speaking of this button over here, this is one of the unique things about this versus a RAV4 hybrid, because the RAV4 hybrid does not have a true mechanical all-wheel drive system, and this absolutely does. So this is going to feel very normative as far as the way that it drives out on the road. Here we have a big Qi wireless charging mat. You can see it has kind of a bump right here in the middle of everything. That's so that some of those larger smartphones with the camera modules that kind of bump out so that they actually sit there a little bit more centered. We have two big cup holders here. And unfortunately, we have my least favorite Hyundai key. You can see they really went for that Hyundai motif in that logo. I just am not a big fan of this round sort of egg-shaped key, and I have noticed that the vehicles we've tested longer term, this key also tends to scratch pretty easily, and underneath the chromy sort of looking plastic is white plastic, and it becomes really obvious that the key is getting worn. Of course, if you don't want to use the key, you can also use phone as key, and this supports the new wideband phone as key technology, so that's probably what I would do. Under here we have a big storage area. You can see it's nice and deep there. You could definitely fit a gallon of milk, I think, inside. Moving over to the driver's side again, you'll notice the driver monitoring system that's part of the highway driving assistance system, and then the new theme for the LCD instrument cluster here. We'll take a look at that maybe while driving. Basically, it has kind of a cartoon flat motif with a sort of solid line that rises on each side as you accelerate for the speedometer and tachometer. I'll go ahead and start the engine here so you can see what that looks like over there. So basically, very similar design for the speedometer over there. Then we have a multifunction readout in the middle. Over here on this side, this is a fingerprint reader, so it's not just a blank space. It's kind of very centrally located there, very prominent for a fingerprint reader. Seat memory settings over there on that side, and then of course the latest Hyundai steering wheel out here. These are not shift paddles. These are actually regenerative braking paddles, so you can adjust the amount of throttle liftoff regen, which is a touch I really appreciate, especially in the plug-in hybrid Tucson. Sport grips up top, leather wrapped, actually kind of a sport grip angle right there at the bottom of the steering wheel. This is a really comfortable steering wheel, I have to say. Controls for the adaptive cruise control, those are found over here on this side. That is a standard feature. Again, something that I really appreciate. I also really appreciate that none of these buttons are touch buttons. All these are regular physical buttons on the steering wheel. On this side, we get volume up, down, track forward, backward, and that favorite button. Then we get the same sort of stock style shifter that we find in the Ioniq lineup. Park is a button right over here, and then to put it in drive, you rotate that forward, and then we do get an LED light right there showing you what gear you're in. It's pretty visible to the driver, so if I put this camera exactly where I'm sitting, you can see that you can definitely actually see what gear you're in, unless the steering wheel is a little bit turned. But for most situations, you actually will be able to see exactly what's going on. To the left of the steering column, we find some additional buttons like the instrument panel dimmer, the electric parking brake, and this interesting 12-volt battery reset button. Here's what's going on. Instead of using a traditional 12-volt battery, they segment a portion of the hybrid battery and actually use that as the vehicle's 12-volt battery. The advantage here is if for some reason you leave something plugged in or whatever and your 12-volt battery essentially dies, all you have to do is get in the vehicle via, whatever means, your key or whatever, and then you hit that button and it's going to actually recharge the 12-volt battery from the high voltage battery so that we don't have to worry about that. If you're interested in a head-up display, the Tucson remains one of the few options in this segment with this particular feature. Even though it doesn't appear that large on camera, that's kind of one of the weird things about head-up displays, it's actually quite large to the human eye. And that's why we have this relatively large bump right there in the dashboard. Although I have to say it's better integrated than many of the other options that offer this particular feature, because they replace the entire upper section of the dashboard here, really giving it a more harmonious look than the models that don't have that feature. For instance, here in the XRT trim, we don't have that large bump. The rest of the dashboard form looks very, very similar, but you can see that the bump is missing. In this model, we also don't have the twin LCD instrument cluster. Instead, we get a more traditional LED digital gauge over here for the driver's side. It looks thematically very similar, but the only LCD going on here is actually just what's in the middle of everything. Everything else is just more of a 1980s style digital gauge. This is a good opportunity to show you the different center console though, because if you don't get the upper end trims or the hybrid models, then we get a different center console design. It's a little bit shiny here in the light, but we get more of a traditional shifter right there. Cup holders a little bit deeper and lower in the center of the console. And then different buttons down here as well. So we have the lock mode button, the drive mode button, auto start, stop, etc., but a different module than we had before. We also have a different center console storage bin, nice and deep as well, but not quite as deep because this entire console is a little bit lower to the ground. And then of course we don't find that large storage well in the middle of everything. On the other hand, the steering wheel and the steering wheel controls are very, very similar. You can see we still have the adaptive cruise control over there. No paddles on the back of this wheel. You don't find those in the XRT trim. And we also don't find materials that are quite as premium. So in this model, we actually have hard plastics up here at the top of the door. We then have a soft touch insert in the middle, hard plastics textured to look like fabric there, and then we find hard plastics there and a soft touch insert for the armrest rather than an entire soft touch surround. All right, let's get the Tucson Hybrid out on the road. You're going to notice a few things when you put your foot down the first time. The first thing, of course, is that there's a bit more of a delay in this hybrid system than we find in the RAV4 Hybrid or the CRV Hybrid, because this hybrid system has a very different design than either of those hybrids. And actually, all three have their own unique design elements. What's unique about this is that it contains a traditional 6-speed automatic transmission. So whether you're driving it normally or you're driving it a bit more aggressively, you're actually going to get transmission shifts because there's actually a transmission under there. And there really isn't a transmission in a traditional sense in either the CRV or the RAV4, but again, those are very different systems. Both of those are going to feel more like a CVT than what we see here. And again, this is going to have a more normative feel. The downside though is that there is going to be a bit of a delay in the ramp up of power. So for instance, if I come to a complete stop here, hopefully the engine will turn off and cooperate. It actually didn't. There we go, the engine finally turned off. If I just floored it, there is a moment where the only thing motivating the vehicle forward is that electric motor. And the electric motor is not as beefy as the one that we find in the CRV, so that initial launch is just not quite as aggressive. Of course, then the 1.6 liter turbo joins the party and we get a lot of low-end torque. And that's really thanks to the turbocharger on the engine. Something that's very different in both the Honda and of course the Toyota hybrids. In the Honda hybrid, anytime you're flooring it, you're in serial hybrid mode, so all you have going is the electric motor. Feels more like an EV. The RAV4 hybrid, on the other hand, is going to feel a bit more like a traditional CVT, and then if you're at higher altitudes, you're really going to notice that you start running out of steam because it's a naturally aspirated engine with less torque than we find out of this 1.6 liter turbo, and that torque peak happens at higher RPMs. So if you find yourself hill climbing up to the Tahoe Basin, or you're in Colorado and you're trying to go up the Continental Divide, you'll definitely notice a difference at lower states of charge in this hybrid versus those other hybrids. Definitely a different feel. The other thing that's more traditional about this hybrid system, especially versus the RAV4 hybrid, is that we get a traditional mechanical all-wheel drive system. So if you're in snow, on ice, if you're on a dirt surface, this is going to feel much more like the traditional Tucson, even down to that lock button I showed you earlier. So at lower speeds, you can command almost a full lock of the center coupling to send more power to the rear axle. In the RAV4 hybrid, you still have decent traction in adverse weather, but you have a very different feel, and that's really noticeable, especially in snow. To get more power to the rear axle, you kind of have to start spinning up the front tires, which is not always something you want to do, especially if your front tires are already starting to sink into something like sand or snow or whatever it is that you're on. This is going to have a much more consistent feel. But then there are the downsides. 0 to 60 time, of course, is going to be a little bit slower than some, but also fuel economy is going to be a little bit below the segment leaders. So you don't get 40 miles per gallon in here. You do lose a few miles per gallon. On the other hand, whether we're talking about the hybrid or the plug-in hybrid, it's significantly more efficient than something like the Outlander plug-in hybrid. That's only 26 miles per gallon on average, and the plug-in hybrid version of this, which is the least efficient version as far as the hybrid systems go, still significantly more efficient than that. It's up there in the 30s, and you will notice significantly better real-world performance as far as fuel economy. That all has to do with the dedication to efficiency, the aerodynamic profile, and the other factors going on here. The fact that this is a parallel hybrid system. If you live in a state with high speed limits or you just like driving fast, you are going to notice a real world fuel economy difference between this and something like the CRV. This and the RAV4 are going to be notably more efficient. The CRV has only one fixed ratio that it can use at highway speeds, and that one fixed ratio is more akin to maybe 4th or 5th gear in this transmission. It just means that the engine's going to be spinning an awful lot faster, and it's not going to be as efficient in those situations. Over a day of mixed driving, we've been averaging between 27 and 37 miles per gallon in this vehicle. Right now we're showing 27 after having spent quite a lot of time with this idling during photo shoots. So 2 hours, 17 minutes over just 52 miles. That should give you an idea of how much time we spent parked with the air conditioning running, and that fuel economy average is still pretty reasonable. For my final scores, of course, you're going to have to wait until we can get one of these at home and run it through our usual battery of tests, but it's easy to say that Hyundai has continually refined their hybrid system, and this is easily the most refined version that we've ever seen. And refinement-wise, it rivals any of the other hybrid systems currently on the market. And that's not what I would have said about the first generation Hyundai hybrid system with the original 6-speed automatic transmission that debuted over a decade ago. That system was a little bit rough around the edges, and I constantly found myself asking, why do we have this particular combination of features going on? Why do we have a hybrid system with an automatic transmission? Why did Hyundai have a hybrid system with a dual clutch transmission? Why not just ditch one and use, I don't know, the dual clutch in everything? Well, I think over the years, Hyundai has answered all of those questions. By maintaining a traditional 6-speed automatic transmission and using a traditional torque converter, this is as smooth and has as good a low-speed crawl as you find in the regular Tucson. And that's probably the biggest thing that I can say about this. This is the kind of hybrid system that just goes unnoticed. If you just picked a random person and plopped them in the seat, they might think, wow, this is just a fantastically efficient regular car with the smoothest auto start-stop system I've ever seen. And the auto start-stop system that you're not going to want to turn off because there's no compromise. The air conditioning stays running. You can still go 0 to 60 in just over 7 seconds. It feels very, very normal, except that you're getting 35 to 37 miles per gallon depending on how you drive the car. And that's not what we see in the competitive hybrid systems. So if that's for you, then you should definitely look at the Tucson. If on the other hand you want the absolute best in fuel economy, then of course you are going to get a few miles per gallon better in that RAV4. If you want to get your hands on the new Tucson, these should be on dealer lots right around the time that you're watching this video. Of course, be prepared to pay a bit more for 2025 than in 2024. But I think the pricing is still pretty reasonable, especially given the extra feature content that we find for the refreshed model. It's going to start at $28,355 plus destination for the SE trim, which comes well equipped with a ton of driver assistance tech standard, things like adaptive cruise control, etc., with full speed range assist that's standard on every trim. Of course, I think a lot of folks are probably going to want a limited Tucson like the one that we've been driving here, with or without the hybrid system. The limited trim, non-hybrid, starts at $38,295. So it is a pretty reasonable bump over the absolute base model, but you get most of what you see in this vehicle right here. If you want a fully loaded Tucson, you're going to end up at $41,660 before you add the hybrid system. Of Of course, the hybrid system is going to add some money, but it's also going to improve fuel economy and improve performance, because not only do we get the fuel economy bump up to 35 to 38 miles per gallon, you also get more power out of the system. Hyundai says that last year they sold about 25% of the lineup as a hybrid. I suspect that number is going to grow because the hybrid system should be more available over time, and it's simply the better way to get the Tucson. It's really a no-compromise hybrid. The only thing that the hybrid model lacks is a spare tire in the back. That's one thing that I would add, but you have the ability to add it because that spare tire well still exists here. You might be wondering, why do companies delete the spare tire? Well, obviously cost savings is one of them and weight savings is another, but I like the fact that they maintain that spare tire well rather than filling it with some sort of vehicle system that couldn't be moved. Now the hybrid system, that's going to set you back at least $32,575, but on the pricing ladder, of course, it's going to follow the non-hybrid model pretty linearly, and it's going to top out over $42,000 fully loaded. If you want the plug-in hybrid, and for me, that's one of the more interesting options, that's going to be $38,725. That's going to get you 32 miles of all-electric range and 35 miles per gallon when everything is done. That's a fantastic option if you have the ability to plug it in, of course, and if that's of value to you. You won't get the federal tax credit though, because the plug-in hybrid is not built in the United States. The batteries aren't sourced from where they need to be sourced. So keep in mind that even though you're paying $6,000 extra for the plug-in hybrid system, you're going to have to want to do that because it's not going to save you money on taxes or anything else. It's going to be saving you money on gasoline consumption, and it's going to really stretch out the number of times you have to go visit the gas station, because on my daily commute, I might never have to fill with gasoline. It has an onboard 7.2 kilowatt charger, which is another big feature for that plug-in hybrid model. Because it's relatively efficient, it can charge that battery in just about 2 hours. And if you are on the wait list for a RAV4 Prime, you'll notice that the base charger in the RAV4 Prime is significantly slower, so it's going to take longer to charge that battery. This is not as bonkers powerful as the RAV4 Prime, but if I were choosing between the two, I suspect I would actually lean towards the Hyundai over the RAV4 Prime for two reasons. There's the price tag, there's the all-wheel drive system that we find in the vehicle, and there's the rapid charging as well. The fuel economy, it is a little bit lower than the RAV4 Prime, let's be honest. But I think that all of the other features put together just make it a more enticing option, especially if you're looking at the upper end trims where the interior feels significantly more premium and significantly fancier. I also think this compares very well to the CR-V Hybrid. The CR-V Hybrid has about the same amount of power in reality that we find out of this hybrid system, but a different feel. If you're looking for a traditional feeling hybrid system, this has a 6-speed automatic. It's going to feel very, very normal. Of course, we have the Ford Escape as well, but the Escape appears to be sailing off into the sunset. So let me know in the comment section, what would you get? Do you like the exterior redesign? Pre-refresh, I wasn't the biggest fan of the front end design in the Tucson, but this new front end design where it's been a little bit squared off and a little bit tweaked with these individual elements in the front, I think now it's actually speaking to me, and certainly more than the Kia Sportage. The Sportage's front end, I think it's just a little bit funky. You get a lot of the same features and functions and driver assistance systems and the plug-in hybrid and hybrid system, etc. in the Kia Sportage, but the style is definitely going to be very different. Let me know what you think about that too, and of course stay tuned because I'm also driving the Santa Fe and of course the Santa Cruz out here in Southern California. And that would of course be the new Santa Fe Hybrid. So be sure and stay tuned for those videos, and I'll see all of you later.